بسرعة. طيب نبدأ يا سلطان. نبدأ. إيه؟ عندك قلم؟ مقدمة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد، حياكم الله في هذه الدورة، وهي الدورة الأولى المترجمة باللغة أو باللغتين العربية والإنجليزية. أسأل الله جل وعلا أن يجعلها خالصة لوجهه الكريم، ونشكر الله سبحانه وتعالى على أن يسر لنا مثل هذه المجالس. نشكره سبحانه وتعالى شكرا جزيلا لا يوافي بنعمه، فله الثناء وله الفضل وله المنة سبحانه وتعالى على هذا الخير الذي نحن فيه. ثم نشكر من كان أيضا سببا في الإشراف على مثل هذه الدورات، دائرة الشؤون الإسلامية والعمل الخيري بدبي، على ما يقدمونه من دورات علمية والإشراف على المناشط الدعوية. أسأل الله جل وعلا أن يبارك لهم وفيهم. ثم كذلك الشكر إلى مركز رياض الصالحين القائم على هذه الدورات والمرتب لمثل هذه اللقاءات. أسأل الله جل وعلا أن يبارك في منشئه، في أهله وماله وولده، وأن يجعله مباركا. وأشكر الحضور جميعا، من يستمع ومن حضر ومن تعنى أمر السفر من خارج البلد. أسأل الله جل وعلا أن يبارك في الجميع، وأن يجعل هذه في موازين الحسنات، وأن يجعل هذه خطى مباركة. أشكر كذلك أخي المفضال على قيامه بالموافقة على أمر الترجمة. أسأل الله أن يبارك له في أهله وماله وعمله. وأعتذر من التأخير الذي حصل، لأن الطائرة وصلت في وقت متأخر، لكن الحمد لله على ما يسر، والحمد لله على ما ييسر سبحانه وتعالى.
So the Sheikh, Ta'ala, he began praising Allah Ta'ala, beseeching Allah to send salat and salam upon the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his family, his companions all together in great abundance. So may Allah Ta'ala extend, or may Allah Ta'ala, He give all of you life and extend your life. We welcome you to this Dawrah, which is the first translated Dawrah from the Arabic language to the English language. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to make the likes of these efforts to be sincerely for His noble face, Azza wa Jal. And we thank Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for that which He has facilitated for us from the likes of these gatherings. And we express our gratitude to Him, knowing that our gratitude does not fully correspond with the blessing of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala upon us. The Sheikh, he says that similarly we would like to thank and express gratitude to those who were responsible for facilitating the likes of these gatherings, and that is the Committee of Islamic Affairs here in the Emirates. And we ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to bestow His favors and His blessings upon them for that which they facilitate from activities related to the likes of these conferences. He says, and this is here in Dubai. And we likewise ask Allah Ta'ala to bestow His blessings and favor upon the Markaz Riyadh al-Salihin, who was responsible for bringing together and arranging and organizing the likes of these seminars. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to bestow His favors and blessings upon the mudir of that Markaz, and to place blessings in all of his activities and all of his efforts. Similarly, we want to express gratitude to the attendees, all of those who have attended from far and wide, those who have traveled from outside of the area for coming and seeking to benefit within the likes of these conferences. Similarly, we want to express gratitude to our brother who will be responsible for translating. We ask Allah Ta'ala to place a blessing within his efforts. Likewise, we apologize for the delay because it was a bit late due to the plane, being late and arriving and the likes of this. So we ask Allah Ta'ala to confer upon us his favors and his blessings in this regard.
بارك الله فيك. الكتاب كما هو معلوم المعلن عنه هو كتاب الأدب من كتاب الجامع من بلوغ المرام. المصنف هو الحافظ ابن حجر رحمه الله رحمة واسعة، وهذا الكتاب عموم كتاب بلوغ المرام المتعلق بأدلة الأحكام من الكتب العظيمة، وتم اختياره كما يظهر لأهمية هذا الباب الذي ختم به الحافظ ابن حجر رحمه الله أحاديث الأحكام، فبعد أن تكلم عن الأوقاف والوصايا والجهاد والنكاح وقبل ذلك أمور العبادات والصلاة وغير ذلك، ختمه بهذا الباب لما يحتاجه المؤمن من الآداب والأخلاق، وجعل هذا الجامع على 6 أبواب، اخترنا منها الباب الأول وهو الباب المتعلق بالآداب، وسيكون الشرح شرحا مختصرا حتى يتسنى أمر الترجمة، وأيضا ستكون الترجمة إن شاء الله ترجمة مباشرة ليس فيها طول عبارات حتى لا يمل المستمع سواء بالعربية أو بالإنجليزية. بارك الله فيكم.
So this book, as you all know that we're going to study in this sitting, is the book of Adab, the book of manners, from the compilation known as Bulugh al-Maram. And the author of this book is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. And within this book, he discusses various rulings connected to the religion. And it is a great book, a magnificent book. And the reason for choosing it, as you can see, is due to the great importance that it has, and the fact that the author himself, he mentions the book of Adab after mentioning several other books inside of Bulugh al-Maram. So he mentions, for example, Kitab al-Jihad, Kitab al-Siyam, and the other various rulings of the religion, rulings of buying and selling and transactions and like this, and then he concludes all of that by way of Kitab al-Adab. He says, and so it is due to the fact that the Muslim, or the believer rather, is in need of what is contained inside of this book. And so it is broken down or divided into six individual chapters. And so we're going to, the first of them, the book of Adab, and we're going to explain it with light explanations so as not to make it too long and drawn out, to make it easy for the affair of translation, because as you know, it is a direct translation. There's not some time in between. There's a direct translation. And this is in order that the people, they don't get bored with the Arabic, nor do they get bored with the English, those who don't understand English.
بارك الله فيك. مناسب هكذا الوقت يعني؟ أي لا بس، ولا أنت تتكلم بالعربية وأنا أتكلم بالإنجليزية. بارك الله فيك. ابتدأ المصنف رحمه الله حديثه في باب الآداب بحديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: حق المسلم على المسلم 6: إذا لقيته فسلم عليه، وإذا دعاك فأجبه، وإذا استنصحك فانصحه، وإذا عطس فحمد الله فشمته، وإذا مرض فعده، وإذا مات فاتبعه. هذه 6 الخلال أو الخصال المذكورة في الحديث هي من حق المسلم على أخيه المسلم. وهل الحق أي حق المسلم على المسلم يقتصر على هذه 6؟ لا، فلذلك يقول العلماء العدد هنا لا حجة فيه، أو أن العدد غير مقصود، العدد غير مقصود، لأن هناك حقوق أخرى وردت أيضا في أحاديث أخرى. لكن لماذا هذا الحصر أو ظاهر الحصر؟ قال العلماء يراد بذلك التعليم، جزاك الله خير، يراد منه التعليم، لأن الأمر إذا كان منحصرا كان أسهل في تلقي المعلومة، وإلا فإن الذي يجمع حق المسلم على المسلم هو قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. هذا يجمع جميع الحقوق. كذلك قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: المؤمن للمؤمن كالبنيان يشد بعضه بعضا، ومثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم كمثل الجسد الواحد إذا اشتكى منه عضو تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحمى. إذن ما الذي يلخص حق المسلم على المسلم؟ هو القيام بما أمر الله جل وعلا به من أمور الواجبات أو أمور المستحبات في باب الصلات، أي الصلة بين الإنسان وبين أخيه. نعم.
So the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, he began this book by way of the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, a Muslim has 6 rights or 6 duties towards another Muslim. When you meet him, when you greet him with salams. Similarly, when he invites you, you respond to his invitation. Now, and when he asks your advice, you advise him. When he sneezes and praises Allah, then you say, may Allah have mercy upon you. When he is ill, visit him, and when he dies, to follow his funeral procession. It's hadith reported by Imam Muslim. So these 6 that have been mentioned here in this narration are from the rights of the Muslim. But as it relates to the rights of the Muslim, are they restricted to just these 6? The Sheikh, he says, no, they're not restricted to just these 6. He says, and the ulama have stated that the numbering of restricting them to a particular number is something which has no proof. And so therefore what is intended is not to restrict it to a particular number. So therefore, why is it that he mentioned 6 inside of this narration? And the scholars have mentioned that this is from the bab of ta'aleem, of directing and teaching and education. He says, other than that, he says that the rights are not restricted to a particular number. And the scholars have stated that there is a narration that is more comprehensive in conveying the totality of the rights of a Muslim over another Muslim. It is the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said that none of you truly believes until he wants for his brother or loves for his brother what he loves for himself. He says, and likewise the statement of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, who said that the Muslim to another Muslim, they are like one solid structure, one building. Some parts of it strengthen and support other parts. And so the example of the Muslim in their mutual mercy between each other, their mutual love and mutual affection of one another, is like that of a body. If one part of the body feels ill, then the entirety of the body suffers from sleeplessness and illness. He says, and so therefore, what is intended by way of this is that that the Muslim, he establishes all of that which Allah Ta'ala has made binding and obligatory upon him towards his brother, from those affairs connected to silat and joining the ties and connection and being connected to his Muslim brother.
نعم. أولى هذه الخصال التي ذكرت في الحديث قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا لقيته فسلم عليه. السلام من أعظم العبادات، ولذلك جاء في الحديث بإسناد جيد أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: أولى الناس بالله أبدأهم بالسلام. أولى الناس بالله، أمن بدأهم بالسلام أي بدأ الناس بالسلام. إذن البداء بالسلام أو البدء بالسلام من الآداب الشرعية العظيمة، ومن خصال المسلم التي ينبغي أن يقوم بها. وهل يجب البدء بالسلام؟ خلاف بين أهل العلم، فمن أهل العلم من قال بالوجوب، وإن كان الصحيح في ذلك أنه سنة مؤكدة كما قال أهل العلم. أما رد السلام فلا خلاف في وجوبه، لا خلاف في وجوبه لقوله جل وعلا: وإذا حييتم بتحية فحيوا بأحسن منها أو ردوها. ولو نظرنا في قضية السلام أو لفظ السلام لوجدنا أنه لفظا يتضمن الدعاء، ومعنى ذلك أنك تقول: أدعو لك يا أخي بالسلامة. ولا شك أن هذا مما يحبب النفوس بعضها إلى بعض. فلذلك قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا لقيته فسلم عليه، فإن هذه كما يقال أولى روابط الصلة الاجتماعية بينك وبين أخيك. ومن حرص الصحابة رضي الله عنهم وأرضاهم أن الواحد منهم كان إذا فصلت بينه وبين أخيه حاجز ثم لقيه سلم عليه مرة أخرى. هذا السلام في الأصل أنه مبذول، لكن هل على كل حال فهل يجوز للرجل مثلا أن يسلم على المرأة إن كان في هذا الأمر ليس هناك ما يكون سببا للفتنة فلا حرج، لكن في طبيعة الحال أن الشاب إذا كان يسلم على الشابة فإن هذا باب إلى الفتن. ثم هذا السلام مختص كما جاء في الأحاديث بأهل الإسلام، لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: لا تبدأوا اليهود والنصارى بالسلام. وإن كان من أهل العلم من قال بجواز البدء، لكن الصحيح في ذلك ظاهر الحديث على أن هذا الأمر لا يناقض أن يكون لهم البدء مثلا بنوع من الترحيب أو نحو ذلك، خاصة لتأليف القلوب أو الدعوة إلى الإسلام. نعم.
So, the first of that which was mentioned inside of this narration is the salam. So the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, he said that when you meet him, you greet him with the greetings of peace. So the Sheikh, he says that as it relates to the greetings of peace, the salam, then this is from the tremendous or from the greatest acts of ibadah. And this is due to the hadith that has come from the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, when he said that the one who is awla, the one who has the most right to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the one who initiates the salams. He says, but as it relates to the affair of initiating the salams, he says, then initiating the salams, is it something which is wajib? Is it something which is wajib? He says that in this issue there is a difference of opinion between the scholars. Amongst them are those who say, yes, it is wajib to initiate the salams. He says, amongst them are those who say that it is a sunnah muakkada, it is a stressed or emphasized sunnah to initiate the salams. He says, and this is as it's been stated by the people of knowledge, he says, but there is no khilaf between the scholars regarding the obligation of returning the salam that is issued to you. He says that, and this is due to the statement of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, wherein he says, and when you are greeted with a greeting, then return back that which is equal to it or greater than it. Now, and so the meaning of the salams is that it is a type of dua that you are making for your brother. So it is as if you are saying, I supplicate for you, O my brother, that you have salama, that you have safety and security in your livelihood and in everything connected to yourself and your health and like this. The Sheikh, he says that. And so, due to this, he mentions that when you meet your brother, that you greet him with, you meet your brother, you greet him with the salam. The Sheikh, he says that, and so the salam, that it is the first means of connection between you and your Muslim brother. When you see him, when you greet him, or you encounter him, you give him the salams. You see a brother that you don't know, you go to him, is the first point of contact is the salams. He says, and so, the Sheikh, he says that, but as it relates to the salams, is this something which is just absolute? The affair of giving the salams and exchanging the salams, is it something which is absolute, such that if a man, he encounters a woman, that he greets the woman with salams? Then the people of knowledge, they say concerning this issue is that if there is a fear of fitna, then no. He says, but if there is no fear of fitna, then there's no harm in that. And a fear of fitna, for example, a person may be a young man, she's a young woman, and this may be a door that could lead to something else. And so in this case, it's something which should be stayed away from. He says, as it relates to giving the salams and initiating the salams to something which is specific to the Muslim. As is seen from the narration, the Muslim has 6 rights over his Muslim brother. And then he mentioned this as being the first of them. So the hadith is clear in that this is amongst the rights of the Muslim, and it's not something which is given to the non-Muslim. He says, and this is based upon the hadith of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, where he said, do not initiate the salam to the Jews and the Christians. He says, however, as it relates to responding back to a salam that is given from them, if the salam is clear, then there's no harm in that, because it could be from the bab of you greeting them when they enter upon you, or it may be a door for da'wah and calling them to al-Islam, and it may open up people's hearts and make them inclined towards the religion.
قال في الخصلة الثانية: وإذا دعاك فأجبه. دعاك معنى ذلك إلى طعام، سواء كان إلى وليمة عرس أو إلى غير وليمة عرس. يقول أهل العلم هذه الدعوة غالبا تذهب شحناء النفوس والبغضاء والتنافر الذي يكون في القلوب، لأنك أحيانا ربما إذا ابتعدت عن أخيك لغير سبب وجدت في قلبك جفوة لا تدري سببها، فكان من أسباب إذهاب هذه البغضاء والجفاء التقارب، ومنها إجابة الدعوات. وهل هذا الأمر للوجوب فيما يتعلق بدعوة الوليمة دون غيرها، أم هو شامل لجميع دعوات الولائم؟ فمن أهل العلم من قال بهذا ومن أهل العلم من قال بذاك، وإن كان القول بأنها واجبة في جميع الدعوات قول ظاهر، وهو ما يختاره الشيخ ابن باز رحمه الله رحمة واسعة، لما جاء في أثر ابن عمر رضي الله عنه أنه قال: إذا دعا أحدكم أخاه فليجبه عرسا كان أو نحوه، عرسا كان أو نحوه، إلا أن يكون هناك سبب كما هو معلوم من وجود منكر أو من تعسر ذهاب كمرض أو نحو ذلك. فإذن هذا الأمر مما يحرص عليه، ولا يعتذر الإنسان لأدنى سبب دون أن يكون عذرا شرعيا صحيحا في ذلك. نعم.
So the next affair that the Sheikh mentions is the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He mentioned wherein if he invites you, or when he invites you, you respond to the invitation. The Sheikh, he says that, and so meaning that if he invites you for food and the likes of this, whether it is a walima of a marriage that just took place, or some other type of gathering of food and the likes of this, or banquet or a feast. He says, and so the scholars, they say that that this particular right here, it is the greatest of them in terms of removing grudges and removing ill feelings between the Muslims. This has the greatest effect as it relates to this issue. He says, because if a person, they had something in their heart for their Muslim brother, and then the brother turns around and invites you to his gathering, he invites you to where his family just got married and the likes of this, he invites you to partake in that, it'll be quick in terms of the removal of whatever grudges that there lie between you and that person. He says, and so as it relates to the obligation of responding to the invitation, is it specific to a walima, or is it for all types of invitations? The Sheikh, he says that some of the scholars say this, some of the scholars say that. But that which is closest to being that which is correct is that it is in relation to all invitations that your brother may give you. And this is that's the chosen viewpoint of Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Baz. He says, and this is based upon the narration of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, who said that if your brother, or the Messenger of Allah said, if your brother invites you to a walima, he invites you to a gathering, whether it is a walima of a marriage that took place or any other type of gathering, then accept this invitation. He says, and this is unless a person has a sabab, he has a reason for not going. Perhaps there is some munkarat, there is some lewd and evil actions that are going on at that walima and you are aware of that, or there is some other legislative reason for you not to go, then you don't go. But besides that, if you have no legislative reason, then a person should go. Any other permissibly legislative reason that would prevent a person from attending that walima, then they are a legislative excuse for him not to accept it.
ثم يقول صلى الله عليه وسلم: وإذا استنصحك فانصح له. لفظ الحديث يقول: وإذا استنصحك، أي طلب منك النصح، وهنا يتأكد الأمر عن كونك تبتدئ أنت النصح، فإن طلب منك صار الأمر مؤكدا، والنصيحة أمرها عظيم، ولذلك قال أهل العلم: النصيحة هي بذل الخير للغير، بذل الخير للغير، وهذا يشمل قضية اللفظ، يعني النصيحة باللفظ، أو حتى ما يتعلق بالعمل، إن كان في هذا الأمر نصيحة له أو بيان أمر له. ولذلك النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قال في حديث يبين عظم أمر النصيحة، قال: الدين النصيحة. وكأنه يعني لفظ الحديث يفيد حصر الدين في أمر النصيحة، ذلك لعلو منزلتها وأهمية مكانتها. فالنصيحة يدفع الله جل وعلا بها من الشرور، وفيها بيان لطريق الخير، ويدخل في هذا تعليم العلم، ويدخل في هذا الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر، ويدخل في هذا الدعوة إلى الله جل وعلا، ويدخل في هذا التحذير من الباطل. هذا كله من معاني النصيحة الشرعية. وإذا كان الأمر يقتضي أن المسلم ناصح لأخيه المسلم، فيتبين بذلك حرمة الغش بين المسلمين، وحرمة الخداع، وحرمة الغدر، وحرمة التدليس والتلاعب وأكل أموال الناس أو حصول المظالم، فإن هذا يناقض أمر النصيحة الشرعية التي يجب للمسلم أو تجب للمسلم من أخيه المسلم. نعم.
The next statement of the Messenger of Allah alayhi wasallam in the narration mentions that when he seeks or when he asks your advice, then advise him. When he asks your advice, then advise him. He says, meaning that if he seeks from you, he seeks from you some sincere advice, then you give that advice to him. He says, and what is better and takes more precedence than that is that if you know he needs the advice, even if he doesn't ask you, you give it to him. You know that he's in need of your advice, even if he doesn't ask you, give it to him. He says, and now the meaning of nasiha is that, nasiha is from the great aspects of the religion, and the meaning of it is that one exerts good for someone else. You exert good for someone else. He says, and whether that be by way of you clarify to that person some affair of the religion, or you give him advice regarding some other affair. And what clarifies the great status that nasiha has within the religion is the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wherein he mentioned that ad-deen an-nasiha, that the religion is an-nasiha. The religion is an-nasiha. So it is as if he brought all of the religion together by way of this one particular affair, which is an-nasiha. He says, and this is due to the great status that it has. So whether it be that a person, he gives a nasiha by way of giving advice to his Muslim brother who he knows in need of advice, or whether it may be by way of teaching and educating, or whether it may be by way of enjoining the good and prohibiting that which is evil, or whether it may be calling the people, giving da'wah and calling the people to al-Islam, or whether it may be warning them against batil, all of these are from the avenues and methods and means of an-nasiha. He says, Naam, and so if the affair is like this, and it is necessary, or advice is needed, and it is a necessity, but a person does not give nasiha when he knows that nasiha is needed, then in this case, this is considered to be ghish. It is a type of cheating, it is a type of deception, it is a type of betrayal of one's trust, it is a type of underhanded behavior, and all of this opposes the affair of an-nasiha. All of this is in opposition to the affair of an-nasiha.
ثم قال صلى الله عليه وسلم: وإذا عطس وحمد الله فشمته. وهذا يعني أمرين. أما الأمر الأول فإن من حق المسلم على المسلم أنه إذا عطس فحمد الله أن يشمته أخاه، ومعنى يشمته أن يقول له يرحمك الله. إذا قال الحمد لله يقول يرحمك الله. ويقتضي الحديث أيضا أنه إذا عطس المسلم فلم يحمد الله أن لا يشمت. وهذا فيه تدريب للنفس على قضيتين: أن ذكر الله جل وعلا حتى في أيسر الأمور، حتى في أمر العطاس، فإن الإنسان يحمد الله. ويقول العلماء لما في ذلك من المصالح العظيمة التي دفعها الله عن بدنه من الضرر حينما أخرج هذا الأمر في مثل هذا الفعل. وهل يقال للإنسان احمد الله؟ قال أهل العلم لا حرج في ذلك، يعني لا حرج في ذلك أن يذكر إذا نسي، يقال له هل حمدت الله أو احمد الله، فإذا حمد الله قيل له يرحمك الله، فيقول هو ويجيب أخاه يهديكم الله ويصلح بالكم، يهديكم الله ويصلح بالكم. طيب، ما حكم تشميت العاطس؟ هذا الحديث يدل على أمر السنة، وجاء في الحديث الآخر ما يدل على الوجوب، وهو قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا عطس أحدكم وحمد الله كان حقا على كل من سمعه أن يقول له يرحمك الله. وإفادة الوجوب تقتضي هنا في لفظ الحديث أنه فرض عين على من سمعه، لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: حقا على كل من سمعه. ومعنى هذا أن لا يقال بأنه على فرض الكفاية، هذا ظاهر الحديث، وهو الذي يعني بمقتضى هذا الظاهر يرجح القول بالوجوب. نعم.
Then he mentions, and when he sneezes and praises Allah, then say, may Allah have mercy upon you. The Sheikh, he says that. Now, and so this portion of the narration, it contains two matters. Firstly, from the rights of the Muslim is that if he sneezes and praises Allah, then you say in response, Yarhamukallah. Also, what we can get from the narration, that if a person sneezes and does not praise Allah, then you don't say to him, Yarhamukallah. He says that. But what we get from this narration as well is the importance of remembering Allah in all circumstances, even in relation to the smallest of affairs, such as sneezing. The Sheikh says that, and this is due to that which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala brings about a benefit and the repelling of harm from the body by way of that sneeze. He says that, and so as it relates to the person who sneezes and praises Allah, or if the person sneezes and does not praise Allah, then should a person remind him and say, Ihmad Allah, praise Allah. Then the scholars, they say that there's no harm in that. There's no harm in you reminding him that he needs to praise Allah Ta'ala after his sneeze, and then once he praises Allah after his sneeze, then you can respond to your brother by saying Yarhamukallah. He says that in relation to this tashmeet, or the saying of Yarhamukallah after the sneeze or sneezes and praises Allah, what is its ruling? He says what is apparent from this hadith is that it is a sunnah. It is a sunnah. However, there is another hadith which comes and proves or it lends support to the view that it is an obligation. It is a statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said that if one of you sneezes, then it is a right, it is a haqq upon everybody who hears him. Or if he sneezes and praises Allah, then it is a haqq upon everybody who hears him that he says, Yarhamukallah. He says, and so this narration lends support to the view that it is fard ayn upon everyone who hears the person sneeze and praise Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. He says, but what is zahir, what is apparent from the other narration is that it would be a fardun kifaya, that if some of the people, they do it, then it removes the obligation from others in this regard.
ثم قال صلى الله عليه وسلم في ذكر الخصلة الأخيرة قال: وإذا مرض فعده وإذا مات فاتبعه. هذا فيه قضية عيادة المريض، وعيادة المريض فيها فضائل كثيرة، فإن الإنسان كما جاء في الحديث يمشي بين خرف الجنة. وقال في الحديث القدسي: هلا عدت عبدي إذ مرض إذا عدته وجدتني عنده. وهذا يدل على فضيلة عيادة المريض. ثم إن فيها من التسلية للمريض، ولا سيما إذا كان الزائر محبوبا. وعلى هذا ذكر أهل العلم في آداب الزيارة آدابا كثيرة، ليس هذا موطن ذكرها، ولكن من أهم هذه الآداب أن يكون في هذه الزيارة ما ينفع المريض، مثل تسليته بالكلام الطيب، وعدم ذكر الأقوال التي ربما تزيد من مرضه أو من همه أو من غمه، وعدم الإثقال عليه في الجلوس إلا إذا علم الزائر أن المريض يحب بقاءه أو نحو ذلك من الأمور. ثم أيضا اتباع الجنازة، فإن هذا حق للميت، كما أن له الحقوق في الدنيا في حال حياته، فكذلك له الحقوق حينما ينتقل إلى دار البرزخ. وأول هذه الحقوق بعد تغسيله وتكفينه والصلاة عليه شهود شهود الجنازة، وكما تعلمون أنه ورد في ذلك من الفضائل الشيء الكثير، وأن الإنسان إذا صلى وشهد الجنازة كان له قيراطان، القيراط الواحد مثل جبل أحد. إذن هذه الزيارة سواء للمريض أو زيارة القبور هي مع ما فيها من نفع للمريض أو ما فيها نفع للميت، كذلك فيها نفع للزائر أو لمن شهد الجنازة، فإنها تذكرك الآخرة. ومن زار مريضا رق قلبه وعرف حقيقة الدنيا، وعلم أنه كما أن هذا كان يوما من الأيام صحيحا فتحول أمره إلى مرض، أن هذا هو حال الدنيا التي تتقلب، وأن الدنيا لا تبقى على حال واحدة، فهي بين حزن وفرح، وبين سعادة وترح، وبين علو ونزول، وحال الإنسان فيها متقلب. فلذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في أمر القبور: كنت نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور ألا فزوروها فإنها تذكركم الآخرة. نعم.
Then he mentions the last of these rites that have come in the narration, and he mentions that when he's ill, visit him, and when he dies, follow his funeral procession. The Sheikh, he says that, and so the issue of visiting the sick is something which has many virtues. He says, and the virtues are too many to count. From them, the Messenger of Allah, he mentioned that the one who visits the sick is as if he's walking in the pastures of Jannah. Likewise, the narration, the Hadith Qudsi, which the Messenger of Allah said, that Allah Ta'ala said that visit the sick and you will find me along with him. He says that as it relates to the affair of visiting the sick, then it is something which there are many mannerisms or adab connected to it. And this is not the place to mention all of the adab of visiting the sick. He says, but from amongst the most important of these adab is that you visit the sick, and as long as it's beneficial to that sick person, as long as it's beneficial to the sick person himself. And likewise, that you speak good words to the person. You supplicate for them. You make dua for their well-being and for their health and so on and so forth. And likewise, you don't overburden them with your visit. You don't bog them down and overburden them with your visit. He says, and that you don't stay too long unless the sick person himself desires that, unless they desire that you stay. He says, then he mentioned thereafter the affair of the janazah. The affair of the janazah. He says, and this is likewise amongst the rights of the Muslim, because the deceased Muslim has rights just as the living Muslim has rights. He says, and so while the Muslim is alive, he has rights upon you. Similarly, when they are in al-barzakh, they have certain rights that are due upon you. He says, and meaning, for example, after he is washed and shrouded and prepared for burial, then he's buried, or he's prayed over, then he's buried, and then from the affair of visiting the graves and so on and so forth, all these are amongst the rights of the deceased Muslim. He says, and when the person he follows the funeral procession of his Muslim brother, then he attains, as has come in the narration, 2 qirats of reward, meaning 2 qirats that are similar to Mount Uhud in terms of his reward for visiting or for following the funeral procession of his Muslim brother. He says, and so we see from these 2 last rights, the rights of the sick, likewise the rights of the deceased. These rights in reality, they come back, and the benefit of them, they benefit the sick person and the deceased person, as well as the person who is visiting them or the person who is following their funeral procession. He says, from amongst the benefits that it has amongst for the person who witnesses or goes to follow the funeral procession or visit the sick, it softens the heart. It softens the heart, and it likewise is a reminder for the person who is engaging in this lofty and virtuous action, and lets him know that his heart should not be attached to this dunya, because this is how the dunya is. It is a transitional place. That is, the person comes and he goes. It is a place wherein we are between states of happiness and sadness. We are between states of being elevated and lowered, being sick and being healthy, and like this. And so, so all this lies, all this shows from the benefits of visiting the sick, as well as following the funeral procession, even going to the graves and visiting the graves. It serves to soften the heart. And this benefit can be seen in the statement of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi as-salam, I used to prohibit you from visiting the graves, now visit them, for they are a reminder for you of death.
نعم بارك الله فيك. الحديث الثاني هو قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم انظروا إلى من هو أسفل منكم ولا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم فهو أجدر ألا تزدروا نعمة الله عليكم. هذا الحديث يبين قضيتين. أما القضية الأولى فقوله عليه الصلاة والسلام انظروا، أو قوله عليه الصلاة والسلام انظروا إلى من هو أسفل منكم، والنظر هنا المراد به التأمل والاعتبار وليس مجرد النظر، فإن الإنسان قد ينظر بعينه إلى من هو أعلى منه أو إلى من هو أدنى منه، إلى الغني وإلى الفقير، لكن أراد صلى الله عليه وسلم نظر التأمل والاعتبار والتدبر والتفكر الذي له أثر على السلوك النفسي. فقوله انظروا إلى من هو أسفل منكم، هذه المسألة هي الثانية، وهي ما يتعلق بأن النظر في أمر الدنيا يكون إلى من هو أدنى منا. إن كان عندك شيء من المتاع فانظر إلى من لا متاع عنده، وإن كان عندك سكن فانظر إلى من لا سكن عنده، وإذا كان عندك شيء من المال فانظر إلى من لا مال عنده. فإنك إذا نظرت هذا النظر عرفت مقدار النعم الحالة عليك التي بين يديك، ولم تتطلع إلى النعم المفقودة التي أنت تطمع فيها، بل سترى أن نعمة الله عليك الموجودة هي منة عظيمة ونعمة كبرى امتن الله جل وعلا بها عليك وحرمها كثير من الناس. ثم يقول عليه الصلاة والسلام ولا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم فإنه أجدر ألا أو فهو أجدر ألا تزدروا نعمة الله عليكم، لأن الإنسان إذا نظر إلى من هو أفضل منه نعمة نسي النعم التي هو فيها، نسي العافية ونسي نعمة العقل، بل ربما نسي نعمة التوحيد والإسلام، نسأل الله السلامة والعافية، لأنه نظر إلى أمر الدنيا. إذن هذا فيما يتعلق بالدنيا، لكن في أمر الدين والطاعات ينبغي على الإنسان أن ينظر إلى من هو أعلى منه، لا تنظر إلى من هو أدنى منك. أنت يمكن تقرأ في اليوم صفحة تقول غيري لا يقرأ من القرآن مثلا، أو تحفظ حديث تقول غيري لا يحفظ، لا، هنا انظر إلى من هو أعلى منك، انظر إلى من يحافظ على الصلوات في المسجد، إلى من يحافظ على الرواتب، انظر إلى من يصوم أيام السنن كالاثنين والخميس والثلاث الأيام، انظر إلى من يقوم الليل، انظر إلى من يجتهد في طلب العلم، وانظر إلى حالك معه، فإن هذا مما يحثك على الازدياد من الطاعات. إذن هذا الحديث بتلخيصه اليسير يفيد قاعدة مهمة جدا، وهو أن الإنسان ينبغي أن يبادر إلى تأمل الأسباب التي تعينه على طاعة الله جل وعلا، وإلى البعد عن الأسباب التي تعينه على أمر النظر في الدنيا والتعلق بها. نعم.
So the Sheikh mentions that the next narration that comes on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, in which he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, look at those who are less fortunate than you, but don't look at those who are more fortunate than you, so that you will not underestimate the favors of Allah or that Allah Ta'ala has bestowed upon you. The Shaykh says that this narration, it contains within it two issues. The first of them is within his statement, alayhi salatu wasalam, look at those who are lower than you. And the word nadar, the nadar here, it is the nadar of examination and contemplation and reflection and thought. It is not another that takes place with the eye, because if you look with your eye, you can see, anybody, those who are richer than you, those who are poorer than you, and the like. But rather, the look that we are commanded with here is the look of contemplation, reflection, and thinking. He says And so we have been commanded to look to those who are lower than us and not look to those who are above us. He says, and this is in the affairs of the dunya. This is in the affairs of the dunya. So you may have, for example, good health and beauty, someone else has more good health and beauty than you do. You may have a house, someone else has a larger house than you do. You may have money, someone else may have more money than you. He said, but don't look at that. Don't look at those who are above you in that regard. Look at those who have less than you. Look at those who have less than you, because this is greater in aiding and assisting you not to belittle or look down upon the favors of Allah Ta'ala upon you, that He has bestowed upon you. He says, for there are many who have or who don't have the things that you have. And the blessings of Allah Ta'ala upon you are tremendous and are great. He says, so you may have certain things that others besides you don't have. So therefore, we've been commanded to look at those who are beneath us and not at those who are above us. He says, so therefore, if you look at the fact that you have good health, there are those who have better health. You look at the fact of intellect, the fact of afwan. If you look at those who are better than you, you look at those who are better than you, then it may make you forget about the favors of Allah Ta'ala upon you. You may forget about the favors of Allah Ta'ala upon you in terms of your health, in terms of your intellect, and even the favor of Tawheed and Islam. And we ask Allah Ta'ala for safety and security. So you begin to belittle Allah Ta'ala's favors upon you. So this is as it relates to the affairs of the dunya, how we are to operate. But in relation to the affairs of the deen and obedience to Allah Ta'ala, then look to those who are above you in that regard, and don't look to those who are beneath you. So don't say, for example, I'm able to read a page out of the Mus'haf, and others besides me don't read. Or I've memorized the hadith, and others besides me don't memorize hadith. Don't look at those who are beneath you in that regard, but rather look at those who are above you. Look at those who strive harder than you and do more than you. So, for example, look at those who have memorized more than you or read more than you, or look at those who they are consistent in praying in the masjid. They are consistent upon the rawatib, the sunnah prayers. Likewise, those who are consistent upon fasting. Perhaps they fast Mondays and Thursdays, or they fast 3 days out of the month. They are consistent upon the night prayer. Now they are consistent upon seeking knowledge. Look at those who are above you in that regard, in the affairs of deen and the obedience of Allah Ta'ala, because this will encourage you to increase in your obedience and to do more and to strive harder. He says, so therefore this hadith, it contains within it a qa'idah and a tremendous principle. And it is that we are to look to and examine the asbab, the means that will increase us in khair and goodness and obedience of Allah Ta'ala, and take those means and look at those means that will increase us in disobedience of Allah Ta'ala, and we stay away from those affairs.
الحديث الثالث يقول صلى الله عليه وسلم: البر حسن الخلق والإثم ما حاك في صدرك وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. هذا الحديث يا إخوة على اختصار ألفاظه، إلا أنه يتضمن قواعد عظيمة سواء في باب الأخلاق أو في باب اجتناب الحرام وما يتعلق بذلك. حسن الخلق أمر جاء في الشريعة الحث عليه، بل إن شريعة الإسلام هي شريعة الأخلاق، ولذلك أثقل ما يكون في الميزان للعبد حسن الخلق. وحينما أراد العلماء أن يحصروا ما معنى حسن الخلق وكيف يقال إن فلان حسن الأخلاق في تعامله، قالوا حسن الخلق يتضمن أمورا ثلاثة. أما الأمر الأول فهو طلاقة الوجه، ومعنى ذلك أن يظهر في وجهك من حسن التعامل ما يترجمه لفظك، طلاقة الوجه. ثانيا بذل المعروف، وبذل المعروف لا يلزم منه طلب بذل المعروف، يعني ليس أن تنتظر من يطلب منك، وإنما بذل المعروف هو المبادرة إلى القيام بالعون والمساعدة والمساندة. والأمر الثالث كف الأذى. إن لم يتيسر لك أن تكون طليق الوجه أو أن تتعاون مع غيرك، فلا أقل من أن تكف شرك عن غيرك، فإن هذا صدقة عليك كما جاء في الحديث، هو صدقة عليك، وهو من التعامل بحسن الأخلاق. لا يرى منك جارك أذية، ولا ترى منك زوجك أذية، ولا يرى منك ولدك أذية، ولا كل من له صلة بك في مقر عملك أو في حيك الذي تسكن فيه أو في سفرك أو في حضرك لا يجد منك القريب منك أي أذية. هذا دليل على حسن خلق عندك. لكن أكمل ذلك أن تتوفر فيك الأمور الثلاثة: طلاقة الوجه، والبذل والعون، وكف الأذى. ثم قال صلى الله عليه وسلم: الإثم ما حاك في صدرك وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. وهذا الأمر يقتضي ترك المشتبهات. معنى ذلك إذا تردد أمر عندك بين حلال وحرام فاترك هذا الأمر ولا تخض فيه، فربما إن خضت فيه خضت في الحرام، وإن تركته لم تؤثم. إن تركت هذا الأمر لم تؤثم، لكن إن خضت فيه ربما وقعت في الإثم. إذن ما الواجب على الإنسان في حال المشتبهات؟ الواجب عليه أن يتأمل وينظر ويصبر حتى يتبين له الأمر، ثم بعد ذلك يقدم عليه، أن لا يكون جريئا على محارم الله ولا متساهلا. كان بعض السلف يا رعاكم الله ربما يترك بعض الحلال خشية الوقوع في الحرام من باب التورع، لا أن الإنسان يتجرأ على الأمر وهو في صدره شيء، وليس بالضروري في صدرك أنه محرم. لو كان في صدرك أنه محرم فمعنى هذا الحكم بالتحريم، لكن في صدرك أن حوله إشكال. فهنا إذا وقع في صدرك شيء من الاشتباه في طعام، في ملبس، في مأكل، في مسكن، في قرض، في سيارة، فإن الواجب عليك أن تتورع وأن تبعد عن الأمر المشتبه. إذن هذا ديدن الإنسان في تعامله في الأمور المالية وفيما يتعلق بأمور التملك. وهو دليل أيضا على أمر آخر، وهو أن تعلقه بأمر الآخرة أعظم من تعلقه بأمر الدنيا. فإنه من دلائل تعلق الإنسان بأمر الدنيا أنه لا يتورع عن الحرام، لكن من دلائل تعلقه بأمر الآخرة ورضا الله جل وعلا أنه ربما يترك الكثير من الأمور حتى لا يقع في مساخط الله سبحانه وتعالى. نعم.
The next narration comes from the authority of النواس بن سمعان. He said, I asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about righteousness and sin, and he replied, righteousness is good character, and sin is that which revolves being doubtful in your heart, and you dislike that the people come to know about it. The Sheikh, he says that, now, as it relates to this affair of husn khuluq, or this hadith, it is short, it is a great and tremendous hadith, and it clarifies the affair of al-akhlaq, or good character, and likewise the affair of the halal and the haram. He says in relation to husn khuluq, or good character, then what is it? He says then the affair of good character, or this sharia, is the sharia of good character. It is a legislation of good character. It is an important part of this religion. He says, and great character, as it relates to what it is, then the scholars, they say that it revolves around three matters. It revolves around three matters. The first of them is having a pleasant and cheerful countenance, meaning when you deal with anyone, they should find pleasure in dealing with you by way of what they are able to find from your face. They are able to find pleasure in dealings with you. Likewise, the exerting of any type of good, the exerting of good. He said it is not a condition that you wait for someone to come seek some good from you, but rather any way that you know that you can help others, any way that you know that you can exert some good, then you leave no stone unturned until you exert that good. And thirdly, it is by way of refraining from harm, so that no harm comes from you. Because if an individual has a cheerful countenance when he deals with the people, he does good, but he harms others, then the other two will be of no benefit. He says, and refraining from harming others, as has come in the narration, it is a sadaqah that you give to yourself. A type of sadaqah that you give to yourself is from refraining from harming others. so that no one who comes into contact with you has to fear from your harm. So whether it is your wife, whether it is your neighbor, whether it is whether it is a relative of those who are close to you, or whether you are traveling, whether you're at home, no one who interacts with you and draws near to you should expect harm from you. He says, and so good character and reality is broad in its scope, but it goes back to these three. It goes back to these three. The next portion of the narration, he mentioned that sin is that which wavers within the heart. It wavers within the heart, and you dislike that the people should come to know about it. The Sheikh, he says that, meaning that it is doubtful inside of your heart. You have doubts as to whether or not this particular affair is halal, is it haram. You are doubtful as it relates to it. In this case, leave it, abandon it, and leave it off. He says because if you were to step into it, then it is quite possible, because it's a doubtful matter to you. So if you were to step into it, it's quite possible that you would end up stepping into something haram. But if you abandon it and leave it off, you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't done anything wrong. He says, so therefore, if the affair is doubtful to you, then leave it off. He said, for some of the Salaf, they would leave it off until you know that it is okay. And once you know that it is okay and it's permissible, then at that point, there's no harm upon you in embarking upon it. And some of the Salaf, they would even leave something that is halal out of fear that it would make them and cause them to fall into that which is haram. He says, so therefore, if there is some doubtful matter, and it is doubtful in your heart as to whether or not it is permissible, then leave off that doubtful affair and safeguard your religion. So whether it is doubtful as it relates to food, clothing, whether it's doubtful as it relates to the type of vehicle that you want to purchase or the manner of purchasing it, whether it is a home, if it is doubtful to you, then refrain from it. Refrain from it, and this is how we are to operate as it relates to our daily life and how we are to be, that we give more importance to the hereafter than we do to this dunya. In everything that we do, we consider our hereafter, and we take that into consideration. Because if the individual gives more precedence and more importance to the affairs of this dunya, then he will fall into all types of affairs. But when he gives more importance to the affair of the hereafter, he's going to refrain from much.
بارك الله فيك. نقف إن شاء الله على هذا ونكمل في اللقاء القادم. صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. وقوموا إلى ضيافتكم. بارك الله فيكم.
So we're going to conclude with this, inshallah ta'ala, and we're going to continue in the next sitting.
بارك الله فيك. إن شاء الله مناسبة المقاطع طويلة شوي. لا بأس إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. الله يحفظكم.